Hi, I'm Ian and welcome back to Astro Time Traveller. It's just gone 5:30 here in the UK this evening, and I'm all set up again with my Skywatcher Esprit 120 ED telescope with a focal length of 863 millimeters. I seem to be getting out of it, together with my ZWO ASI 294 MC Pro. And tonight I'm hunting galaxies again. So I'm going to go for M33, the Triangulum Galaxy. And I'm also using my new ZWO electronic focuser, of which I'm going to do a video to show you how to connect it and how it works fairly shortly. But tonight I'm going to be taking M33. We'll see how it goes. I've already got some images of it, so I'll probably combine tonight's with those and see how they come out and then process them, and I'll show you a final image towards the end of the video. So stay tuned and let's see how it goes. So here I am taking my image of M33. As you can see, this is going to be my 32nd image out of 70. So this is the second night I was doing it. And you can see it's just about to come up on screen. It was just loading up in the ASI Air Pro. So, oh, here it comes. There we go. So I think that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. So I'll just use a bit of the histogram to darken it and just see the galaxy. And there you are. You can see when you press the annotate, it will show you up exactly what the galaxy is. So if I just zoom in and have a look at that, I think that looks pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with that. So I've got it running on the plan mode in the ASI Air Pro. So it will continue to take another 30 odd frames. And after I did that, I then stacked it in Deep Sky Stacker. The 2 nights, I think it was the 4th and the 5th. And here's the one I'm bringing together. So it was the 4th, the 5th, and the 12th. So this is the stacked image. I think it was about 60 images, about 5 hours of data in the end. So if we just do the initial stretch, there we can see it. And I think that looks pretty good. I think it's fairly smooth. And obviously the more integration time you have, the less noise you should have in the image. And I think that looks the case for this particular image. So I think this will be a good one to go ahead and process and go through all of the elements to try and get a good final picture from this M33 image. So first thing I'm going to do is just load up my presets. So I have those stored and there they are. So the left hand column is really the linear and the right hand column non-linear. And the first thing I'm going to do is just going to crop in a bit. Because it was done over 3 nights, there's a little bit of difference around the edges, so I just want to take that down, remove that, and get the galaxy pretty much centered. So I'm just seeing if I can do that, so I can have it fairly in the center of where the main lightness is, right at the center of the galaxy. So I think that works quite well. So apply that, and there we go. So that's the first element, doing the cropping. Now we'll go into a bit of DBE, dynamic background extraction. And again, I have kind of presets for this. I'm going to use division first, and I'm just going to do and generate the size 75 and 25 across the image. And there we go. Now what I don't want is I don't want anything to cover across the actual galaxy. So I'm just going to take those out, and we'll just speed that up a bit to show you what I do with that. So just make sure there's nothing covering the galaxy. So that's not got any squares across it. And therefore we get a better process once you actually apply this. So pretty much done all of that. So just make sure all around the edges, because this galaxy is pretty large and goes right across this particular field of view. And I can put a few others in just up on the top and the side. So I'm pretty happy with that. And then once I've done that, one thing I do is I take a copy across because I'm going to do subtraction. Then I can apply it, and we'll just speed up once I've applied it to jump to the end. It takes a few seconds to do that. So there it is. Just unstretch it and stretch it again. And then I can go back and do subtraction and do the same thing, apply that. And again, now I've done my 2 elements of DBE. So happy with both of those. And now I can move on to the next stage, which is really trying to get a balance across the whole image. So I'm going to use background neutralization, and what we need to do for that is take a preview in a very ideally dark area of the image, put that in as our preview, and then apply that. So there we go. So I think that's just brought down the background tones a bit. Now I want to do similar, bring out a light bit. I just tend to go for the center of the galaxy, and I use the preview one in the background reference and the white in the white balance, preview 2. And then we can apply that, and let's see what that does. So that's actually whitened the image a bit. So there was a bit of color. So we go before, there we go, a bit of pinkness, but a bit of whiteness. So I'm actually going to go with the whiteness one because I just want to see how that is when we actually process it, and see if that should bring out some colors in the galaxy later on when we do further steps. But we don't need the previews anymore, so we can just get rid of those. And now what I want to do is really some noise reduction. So I take a luminous lightness image and just stretch that, and use your stretching using the screen transfer and the histogram function. And there it is. That's now a stretched version to use as a mask. I'm just going to darken it a little bit. So I'll do a quick real-time preview and then just bring that in a little bit. I don't need to worry about clipping because it's just going to be a mask. But that way I'm hopefully going to get a bit more noise reduction in the background by when I apply it and then invert it. So that's the mask. So let's apply that mask to the image. And there it is. Now what I'm going to do is invert that. So I'm going to be protecting the galaxy and doing work on reducing noise. So here's my preset. So you can see I've got the first one here, which is on the luminous. So I can apply that. So just make sure I apply that to the image, and then we'll see that happens. And then I've got a second preset, which I'm now uploading, which is on the chrominance. And again, you can see my settings here if you want to. And then I just apply that. And it takes a few seconds, so I'm just jumping ahead when it applies. And then I've got a final one, which is on the RGB overall with 5 layers. And so I'm just going to apply that. So stick that to the image. And then once I've applied that, that's pretty much all of my linear work done. And I can now move it into non-linear. So we've done that. We've pretty much, we can remove the mask. And that's everything ready before we do a full stretch on it. And I think that looks pretty good. I think the noise reduction has worked quite well, and I'm happy with that at this stage. So the next step I'm going to do is stretch it. So go into the histogram transformation, set up a preview, and then just go across and stretch, and then just make that a bit larger so we can see what we want to do. I'm probably going to end up making this image quite light to start with because I want to keep a lot of the lightness in the galaxy. Now the key thing here is you don't want to bring any of the dark, the shades, you don't want to clip any of that. So you want to keep 0 there in that graph. But you can bring up the lightness a bit more. So I'm going to do that, maybe exaggerate it a bit more, but that's because I want to bring out some of the detail in the galaxy, and this is a good way of doing that. So I think that looks okay. So I think we can apply that, and once we've done that, there we go. Let's apply that now. Close the real-time preview, close the histogram, and there we are. That's the stretched image. So what I tend to do now with a stretched image, I'll do one bit of noise reduction in a minute, but let me take a copy of that. So if I want to, and if I mess anything up, I've got something I can go back to, which is my now stretched image, but I'm going to use a bit of ACDNR and do a bit more reduction. So I want to make a mask of this. So create a mask, get the background as light as possible because that's the bit that's going to be unprotected and the dark will be protected because I really want to again attack the background. So I'm happy with that mask. And then what I tend to do is just tick the lightness mask and move the standard dev up about 3 on each one. And then on the chrominance, I'm going to bring down the amount to about 90.90 and the threshold down to 0.015, similar to the lightness. And then I'm going to apply that. and that'll take a few seconds. So once that's done, we'll jump back in and we'll see what the result looks like. So that's finished. So again, let's just zoom in and have a look at that. Now what you could do is take this off to Topaz Denoise and do some noise reduction there. You could have done it earlier in the linear stage or now in the non-linear. I'm going to do it a bit later on once I've done a bit more work on the image. I'm just going to take another copy now that I've done the bit more noise reduction in the non-linear image. And now I'm ready to move ahead and start doing a series of masks because I'm going to need those for the things I want to do to the background, the stars, and the galaxy. So I create a luminous image, and probably what I want to do is just a little bit of histogram transformation. I'm just going to darken this a little bit before I do my next step. So we'll take a preview and we'll just darken this down a little bit in the background. Not too much, I don't want to go too aggressive, but just a little bit more than the native lightness image that comes out. So we can apply that, and then we close down the preview, we close down the histogram, maybe a touch more on the galaxy, just bring out the galaxy a little bit more darkness on the back. But no, I don't think I'll apply that. No, we'll leave it as it was. So there it is. Now I'm going to use the star exterminator to create an image without the stars of both the galaxy and an image with just the stars. So this takes a little while to run. So I'll come back as soon as that's finished and we'll have these two new images. So there we are. So there's the stars and behind that is the galaxy. So what I'm going to do on the stars, I'm just going to use a bit of histogram transformation again to just darken that a little bit. So if we just click on a real-time preview and just darken it and bring out the stars. Remember, there's going to be a mask, so we're not affecting the real image at the moment. It's just around how we're going to use and apply the mask that we're going to create. So that's that one. So we'll put that to one side, and then we've got a galaxy. Now I may or may not use this. I probably won't, but what I'll do is I'll just do a little bit of histogram work on it, just again to darken the background and leave the galaxy there. Sometimes I use this mask, sometimes I use a dual mask where I'm going to be able to work on the galaxy and protect the stars and the background. Similar to this, but so let's just do that. Let's just save this and we'll probably call it, why don't we call it Galaxy Mask, so call it GM. And if we just tap that in, so GM, there we go. And we can save that. And we'll be using that. Maybe we'll use that, maybe we won't. Let's see. But the star, why don't we call the star mask now SM? So that's the star mask. And there we go. Now I want to create another mask. So what I'm going to do is create another luminous extract. I probably should have saved the other one earlier and done a clone of that rather than doing this twice. So again, I'm now going back in there in a very quick piece of histogram transformation again, just to bring it down in the background. So there we go, just darken that. I won't go too crazy on this, other than I want to get the galaxy a bit phased out. So the darkness, pretty much as before, but the galaxy I'm going to try overexpose because I'm going to use this to work on the galaxy in a little while. So just push it a little bit. That's it. So we're getting it fairly dark in the background and we're kind of washing out the whole of the galaxy. And that's going to be useful when I'm going to apply that in a second to the whole image and just focus mainly on changes that I want in the galaxy only. So we'll apply that. Don't want to do a second stretch, so we'll leave that. So we can now save this one, and this time we'll call this the full mask because it's got everything on it. And what I'm then going to do is create another mask which will be a subset of those two. So I go to Pixel Math, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in an expression that's basically going to be the full mask minus the star mask. So basically the whole picture minus the stars will give me something that will then actually, so I'm just creating a grayscale copy of that. It will give me something that will protect the galaxy whilst, sorry, we'll protect the stars in the background whilst I work on the galaxy. And there you are. So there you can see the galaxy is going to be unprotected, but everything else will be protected. So I'll call that a dual mask DM. So that's it. Now we've got all the masks that we want. So now we can apply these to do different things that we want to do to the mask. So I think it's a pretty good image. If you go into the detail, I think it's come out fairly well so far. So I think the first thing I want to do is probably just lighten up the galaxy and the stars very slightly. So I'm going to create another mask, a luminance mask. I should have done all this at the beginning and just created clones. So it's a bit crazy, but let's go into that. Let's do a little bit of histogram transformation just to darken it again. I think we're pretty familiar with that from now. So just darken it a little bit, not too much. That's good enough to apply. So we can close the histogram transformation, then we can apply the mask. So attach that onto it. And now what I'm going to do is just do a little bit of subtlety on trying to lighten it. So if we go into curves, transformation, and we just bring up a preview with that. And I'm going to darken a little bit at the low end, and then in the higher range just lighten a little bit. So this will hopefully just bring out a little bit more detail later on when I play around with some of the coloration. Now you can go crazy with this, but I don't really want to do that. I just want to do it very, very subtly, maybe once, maybe twice. So it won't have hardly any effect, but just something to try and see how that works. So I've just done it a second time. So I think we're now done with that. So we can take that off. So we can remove the mask. So take the mask off. Now I probably want to put some colors into the stars. So let's open up the star mask and apply that. And now what that will do is it will protect everything but the stars. So I can use curves this time to increase the coloration of the stars. So bring up a real-time preview. Let's just do that again. Bring up a real-time preview. There we go. And let's go on to saturation. And there you go. You can see the colors coming out of the stars. The more exaggerated you become very exaggerated, and that's probably a bit too much. So probably want to be quite aggressive in this first application. So apply that, and then we'll probably apply another one, probably a little bit more gentle the second time. So that's the first one done. So now let's bring that down a bit. You can go and reverse it if you wanted to, but let's just do a little bit, about there. Let's try that. So click on that, and it will do it for a second time, and that just brings out those kind of nice yellows you can see in the stars. So done that. Close the real-time preview. Close curves. Get rid of the mask. Take that off. And now what I want to do is really work on the galaxy. So let's use the dual mask, which will protect the background and the stars and allow me just to work on the galaxy. And I probably want to do some things on looking at the definition of the galaxy, but also some coloration. So there you can see the background of the stars are protected, but the galaxy is ready to do some action with. So that looks pretty good. So let's try HDRM multiscale transformation at 6. If we put that on, we'll see how that goes. Probably should create a preview to do this on, although most of my image is the galaxy anyway. It's always useful to work on a preview. Usually it's quicker if it's only a small part of your image. So if we put that on, ooh, no, I don't like that. Let's try it at 8 and see if that's any better. Nope, I don't like that either. I think it's just being too aggressive. Let's go down to 4. Nope, too fuzzy. So yeah, I don't think I'll use multiscale transformation on this image. I think I want to keep it a bit more subtle. Let's try local histogram equalization, and I tend to have it just under a 500, contrast about 1.5, and the radius about 96. So let's see, this will be a little bit more subtle. Takes a few seconds to do, so we'll just see what that does to it. And I think that should be, I think that's quite good. Yeah, I think that's just bringing out a little bit more of the definition, and therefore when we work on it a bit more, it might bring out a bit more of the lanes in some of the spirals of the galaxy. So I am going to apply that. So we'll go ahead and do that. So we just need to apply that onto the full image. So again, takes a few seconds to do. We'll come back when that's done, and there we are. So I think that looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. Now I'm just going to use the histogram to play around with the coloration. So I can play putting a little bit of blue into the galaxy and see what that looks like. Alternatively, I could do something and put a bit of red into the galaxy. So let's try what the red would look like. Very subtle, but it just brings a bit of colour back in. So yeah, so I think I'm going to do the blue. So I think I'll go back and just try the blue in a second. I can also do this in a little bit while we curve. So let's just put a little bit of blue in through the histogram transformation. Very subtle, but just bringing the blue out a little bit. So, yep, I think that looks good. I don't want to do it twice. That looks a bit too much. And now what I want to do is probably put a bit more colour into it. So let's go into curves. And again, we'll create a real-time preview. So clear everything down, make sure we're on the image, real-time preview. Let's go to saturation. And let's be a bit aggressive on saturation and see what that does. Now you can go crazy and bring out some very peculiar colours. But if you put it a little, not too aggressive, probably midway, you can see that's now brought out a bit more coloration in the galaxy, which I kind of like. I think that works quite well. And it takes a few seconds to process, but yeah, I kind of like that. So let's just see if we add a little bit more blue in. You can either take the blue out or we can put it in. But I think what we'll do is we'll just put it a little bit down at the lower end and just again a very subtle kind of S-curve probably. That doesn't look too bad. Let's just apply that. I don't want it to be too blue, so I've just taken the blue out a little bit. And I think that's pretty much it. I don't need the preview anymore, so we can get rid of that. And I think that doesn't look a bad image now. So I think we're ready to kind of move on to next stages. So if you go in there, yeah, that's not bad. So I think I'm ready to remove the mask, and now we can start saving the image. So the first thing we'll do is we'll save it as a PixInsight file. So I can go back to it in the future and play with it because all the data will be effectively saved as a PixInsight file. But what I'll also want to do, and I'll save that as a 32-bit, what I want to do is create a TIFF file because I'm then going to try and use Topaz Denoise to see if we can just tidy up very subtly any remaining bits of noise in the image. So we'll save it as a TIFF file this time, 16-bit. And once we've done that, we can go into Topaz Denoise, open that up, and then go in and select the image. So need to go to the M33 file and bring that up. So I think that's the January one. And we'll just open that up into Topaz Denoise. So here we are. So we've opened it up. You get 4 boxes. The first box we really want to change and move to being the actual. We probably want to move it up to, say, the NGC 604 area where that big nebula is in the galaxy. So let's change the first box into the original. And then the other boxes, you can see, will just process under the 4 different terms. Now here they have done that. And now you just need to look at it very closely. I kind of like the clear version. They all look pretty close. There's not a lot in any of them really, but I think the clear one just brings out that nebula, the NGC 604, a little bit, very, very subtly. So that's my preference. So let's go with it. So we click on save. That takes a little while to save. So I'll come back when that's done. Just takes a few minutes to do that under Topaz Denoise. There we are. It's now finished. So now we can move on into Photoshop. So if we bring up the image that we've just done, there it is, into Photoshop, just clear it so we can use the filters, and we'll go into filters and obviously good old camera raw filter, our favorite. And that just comes up in a few seconds. And then this is really where it's about what you want to do with it to your own preference. Now, what I tend to do is go into detail and do a little bit on sharpening and a little bit on noise reduction. You can be very aggressive with this. It just depends how it actually impacts your original image, how much is still there to be sharpened or not. So it's all about what you want to see and how you want the actual image to look. So I want it a little bit more sharp, but not very much noise reduction, because I think there's quite a nice lot of granularity in some of the arms of the Galaxy. Then if I come into the basic, I usually play around with texture and clarity, and I usually do them fairly subtle with the texture positive and the clarity negative. But you can be really aggressive on this. You can do some very strange things and see what you get out. You can diffuse the Galaxy, obviously, if you take clarity down a lot, or make it really stand out if you go the opposite way. And if you have them both at the opposite ends, it's actually not too bad in this image. That doesn't look too bad, but no, it's not something I really prefer. So I'm just going to do, as I said, a little bit of subtle positive on the texture and a little bit negative on the clarity. Then you can play around with the exposure. Just want to bring out the Galaxy a little bit stronger in the actual image, and again with the contrast. And then it's down to personal preference on changing highlights, shadows, whites and blacks, and I'll just move these around to what my eye takes a like to. Tend not to move them too much, fairly centralized, but that doesn't look too bad. I think that looks kind of okay, so I think we'll go with that. So we'll click on there, then that will apply it, and then once it's applied to the image, which takes just a few seconds to do, we probably should save the image. There you go. So I think the Galaxy now stands up fairly nicely in that background with the stars and that. So if we just go in and save it, I'll save it as a TIFF. We'll just underscore it dash PS for Photoshop, so we know where it's come from. And then we'll just save that. That takes a few seconds, so I'll jump ahead, and here it is almost now saved. And then I'll save it again as a JPEG. What I often do is I download a lot of my images from my computer to my iPad, and I do that through JPEG and then send them onto my iPad to do that. So if I just save the JPEG, it's obviously a smaller file, which is quite useful for sending around and using, etc. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I've got a tool under filters to actually add star spikes. So if I go into my filters and add the Pro Digital software, star spikes, that brings this up, and I kind of like this because it just adds a bit of flexibility to your image, and you can actually start putting star spikes onto the image. You can be really aggressive and just make it look kind of stupid with far too many. I tend to have it just a little bit below the kind of middle line, and that brings it out on quite a few stars, but not on all of them. And then if you go to the left-hand box, there's a show box there you can tick, and then you can go around the image, and if you've got good data, you can actually then click on the stars, and it will put spikes on them, which is kind of nice. And you've got all different parameters you can do with the spikes, the length, the size of them, the strength, the orientation, how many spikes you want. So it's kind of a cool little add-on product, but it just brings out a little bit more some of the stars around the image. And you also got hide. You can actually hide some of them if you wanted to. So I kind of like that. I think that's nice just to add a few star spikes. So we'll apply that. That just takes a few seconds to do so, and then we can save that. So I tend to save these just as JPEGs as well, because these are really just different versions of the original. And we just call that dash SS for star spikes, and save that. So that's pretty good. Now what I can do is I just might want to darken the background. So I go into my adjustments and just use a bit here over on the histogram just to slightly darken the background, slightly lighten, slightly, that's probably a bit too much. Yeah, that would be too much. Just a very, very gentle S-curve. So just lighten the midpoints a little bit. So we can do that, and then we can apply that. And yeah, I think that's good. So we'll go with that, and then I'll save that again as a JPEG, probably a version 2. So I've kind of shown you from originally taking the image, a little bit from the ASI Air Pro, and then mostly I've shown you how I processed it in PixInsight and a bit of Photoshop. And I think with the amount of data I've got, it's not come out as a too bad image. And I think the M33 is quite difficult to get good images on quite often, but I'm pretty happy with that when you're looking at the details. So hope you've enjoyed that. You've got something out of it. And I'll leave you with the final image of M33.